Welcome to Health Scope on WMKV and WLHS. Each week at this time, we bring you updates on a different medical topic and open the phone lines for you to join the discussion. Now, Health Scope on 89.3 WMKV, 89.9 WLHS, and online at WMKVFM.org. Good afternoon, and welcome to Health Scope on this beautiful Monday afternoon. I'm Robyn Allgeyer, and I am so pleased. I've been very excited about this show, and Annette Januzzi Wick is our guest today, and we are live, so I'm going to give you the phone numbers right now. We have a toll-free number still, but our local number is 513-772-9658, and toll-free 1-877-772-9658. And today's subject is about the book that Annette has just written, based on a collection of blogs that she wrote while caregiving her mother who had dementia. And welcome.
Thank you, Robyn. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it was neat to reach out to you because I saw this, and I took a class that Annette taught a number of years ago, about 6 or 7, I think.
Yes.
And it was with Women Writing for a Change.
Women Writing for a Change.
And I had this unique opportunity to write with individuals who are part of a nonprofit here in Cincinnati called Starfire.
Right.
And we have a volunteer from Starfire who has been one of our longest regular volunteers, once a month, like clockwork. She's here with her social worker.
That's fantastic.
And working on a project that really has helped us. And we're launching a new project, too.
Oh, good.
Tell you
we'll
about that
talk
off
about that
mic.
later.
Yes.
Right. Wonderful.
But it was wonderful to be in a class that, gave me an experience to write with some disadvantaged or Starfire clients physically and sometimes also mentally challenged with different issues.
Right.
They often have caregivers and all different levels, but I learned so much through that experience.
Absolutely. And they're all part of our community.
Yes.
And that was part of their capstone project, was to go out into the community. How do you create a program so that you can be part of the community and so that others are aware of you in the community and connect back with you? And we've stayed connected to one of our young women that was part of that original group, too. So for a long, long time. And just, of course, through writing, because that's where we found that mutual love and respect for each other.
Absolutely. There were some phenomenal things that came out of the pens of everyone in that class. And, it didn't surprise me at all to see that, I mentioned to you before we started that I followed your blog about walking the 52 neighborhoods of Cincinnati that all just got their own flags.
Yes.
I thought of your blog again when I saw that.
Yes. I think they're all very excited. And
yes.
I applaud that effort because I felt like there were a lot of neighborhoods that were really undervalued, overlooked, all the other adjectives that can go along with that. And that was part of my walk, was to really just educate myself on the various communities within the city, and hopefully highlight others. And there were a lot of people that still think Norwood is part of the city of Cincinnati.
Well, you're speaking to a
Norwood native,
yes, George Zahn here.
Right. Gulf Manor was another one. I actually thought that was, because I thought, well, that's cool because I can go out and walk all the golf courses around Gulf Manor. But that's not the case. Gulf Manor is not part of the city of Cincinnati. So, I learned so much through that, and I hope that I educated a lot of others, too.
And I brought that up because this book came out of another series of blog posts, and the fact that you are connecting now with people who have a family member dealing with dementia, and that person in your life was your mom, and that you're bringing writing and your own experience to the community, and you're a connector in that way.
I am a connector.
You absolutely are.
Yeah, I'll give you some backstory on some of how writing and caregiving and dementia all went together. So my mother was living in Northern Ohio. My mother and father were living in Northern Ohio. I was here in Cincinnati when my mom first started showing signs of dementia. So I was doing a lot of my own writing, but I also felt like I needed to be doing something else. And how could I use my gifts, my talents, to educate myself and to help others? So I reached out to the Lois Alzheimer's Center And I said, I have created this program, and it's just a writing program for individuals who have moderate cognitive decline. Do you have interest? We'd like to, I have a colleague of mine. She'll teach this with me. So for 3 years, we went to the Alois, I would say 12 times a year, and we offered these writing programs with the help of the activities director. And they were phenomenal. And I learned so much in how to interact with somebody who has dementia, how to communicate, and really the value that they still had so much inside, and we just had to take the time and listen and provide the right setting for them to either bring forth their stories through writing or just through their own speech, and then we'd write it back down.
And then you'd write it down.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was wondering how that would work. So how did the folks at Alois Center, the ones that are, deeply embedded as caretakers, or the medical side of treating Alzheimer's and taking care of patients, not family members, but
right.
the staff there, were they surprised? Did you face some skepticism at first, or are there some models for this?
I don't know that we faced any skepticism. People were really just open, and in the past, the Alois, when they were initially founded, was known for their innovative ways of caregiving, and they saw that as just one more innovation that they could bring to their residents. So it didn't feel like a hurdle until the staff that was current at the time, until they left. Then it was a matter of trying to convince a whole new administration. And at that point in time, then there wasn't a lot of interest in us continuing. I think they needed the funds to go elsewhere. So, but simultaneously is when I began writing a lot about my mom, and some of it was just personal that I went back, and a lot of the early parts of the book were mined just from journals and maybe even some poems I might have read, or memories of certain incidences in which I recalled my mom kind of stumbling through. And then it just took off from there, and then it became more of a daily practice.
Daily practice, because you said it helped you as a caregiver. Talk a little bit about that. How
Absolutely.
did it help you?
Right. Well, when my parents decided that my father's health was declining far enough, he decided I would be their power of attorney, and they made a decision to move down to Cincinnati. Well, 8 months later, my father passed away, and I was then in the midst of caring for my mom. So there was a lot of energy and emotion and just chaos that I was caught up in. And so I kept writing. And then the further along I went with my mom in her dementia journey, and I was with her for almost 6 years. The more that I wrote, the more I was learning about who I was as a caregiver, who I was to my mother, the more I could come to accept where she was. And it wasn't that I was, the angel when I was in person with her, and that because she could still get mad at me and I could still get mad at her, but I could go home, I could use writing to process, to remember what to pay attention to. And then the next time I was with her, I felt like I was that much more enlightened. And I felt like that was my big learning, and how to really accept my mom for where she was in her disease at each stage. So if I went home and I wrote about whatever my anger or even the joy, I mean, we had so many joyful moments, but I mean, they were just moments. But I had to figure out, how can I carry that joy with me, and how can I get rid of the anger? Well, I did it through the writing.
Yeah. And journaling is Women Writing for a Change. It sort of was based on that initially.
Absolutely.
And
it's not therapy, but it's therapeutic.
Therapeutic. Yeah. And we hear so much about music and dementia, and the phenomenal things that music can do for patients, and sort of transform sometimes nonverbal to verbal, at least for a time. But there's that connection that's made in the brain, obviously.
Music is so important, so important. And
music
obviously,
is
I'm
part of
walking
your...
through Maple Nook
Yes.
communities here, and there's music playing, and there should just be music playing at all times. I feel like there's a lot of care communities I walk into, and they've got the old-time radio in the hallway turned to music, and overhead, or music playing in the beauty salon or something, and it's just so important. And that was really a part of the relationship between my mom and I too, that we really, not we, but I focused on, over time, I had the gift of time, I'll say, to really assess what were the things that were still important for my mom, and how can I keep bringing those things into her life. So music was one of those. And
she sang.
And
she was a singer.
Beautiful singer. She had a beautiful voice. She really did. And in her last couple years, she wouldn't sing so much, but every once in a while she'd slip into something, and I'd get just that snippet of her voice. And again, that's something that I could carry back with me into my day, and to remember that she was still there, and that there was so much of her that was still inside. And there's a lot of there's so many studies out now about music therapy in individuals who experience dementia. There are countless number of programs that I'm sure Maple Knoll and other communities are bringing into
music. Is huge here at Maple Knoll and Therapy.
There's an organization called Cheering for Charity, and it was founded by a former Bengals cheerleader, and they came to my mother's care home, and my mom lit up because they sing, and at the same time there's a lot of movement involved in their actions, almost as if they are, still cheerleading in a way, but they're not. But they're just being expressive. They're touching. They're making eye contact, and they're really just touching the whole person at that point in time. And so my mom got to experience that on several different occasions. And I've been a guest at Cheering for Charity events where I had the opportunity to share and talk about how important that work was to my mom at that time in her life.
Now, you have a wonderful trailer for the book, a video. It's on YouTube. And is that you and your mother singing? Because that's pretty much the soundtrack.
It's just my mom.
Your mom. It is
just my mom singing, and so I have it. Yeah, it's on a bit of a loop, and I'm only in there encouraging her to keep on singing. I'm kind of introducing it in a way, but yeah, it's just I do not have a singing voice. I have a wonderful poetic writing voice, but I do not have a singing voice.
It's okay.
So don't ask me to sing any of the songs that I reference in my book.
That's not in here.
Yeah.
I am talking this afternoon. We are live on HealthScope, and I'm speaking with Annette Januzzi Wick, and she is a blogger. You may have been reading one of her blogs. She visited 52 neighborhoods in Cincinnati and wrote about them. The name of that blog, again, was what?
The name of the city blog was Getting My City On.
Getting My City On.
Getting
I love
My City On, yes. And you can find all the references to my blogs just via my website, which is AnnetteJWick.com. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we will. And the book now that she's just released, and we'll talk about some of the appearances that folks can come out and hear you, is I'll Have Some of Yours. Now, we've got to get to the bottom of that. But let me read the rest of the cover and the rest of the title. What My Mother Taught Me About Dementia, Cookies, Music, the Outside, and Her Life Inside a Care Home. And you were a caregiver of your mom who had dementia for 6 years.
Right.
6 years here in Cincinnati.
I'll tell you, I was at a book festival over the weekend, Cincinnati's Books by the Banks, and those are really difficult for both authors and people who approach the table. It's a little bit awkward because there's this relationship. It's like dating, right? It's like speed dating in a way. And I would set out to introduce my book, and then I'd say, well, my subtitle says it all. When people say, what's the book about? And it's all right there. But my editor and I, as we were thinking through subtitles, we wanted to make sure that those were all the things that were important to my mom. So, and we just felt like we couldn't leave. We'd say, well, what if we crossed out music? No. We couldn't do that. What if we crossed out the outside? And then we went back and forth. Is it sunshine? Is it the outdoors? Is it outside? And I mean, like, it's amazing the choices you have to make when you are putting this in its final form.
Yeah. And really important, too, that it was about you taking care of her.
Right.
In a care home. And we talk about caregiving for our audience all the time here. And so much of what is talked about and shared is how important it is that the caregiver takes care of themselves, because it can just be exhausting.
Yes.
And mentally, emotionally, physically too. And if you get just totally worn down and overwhelmed by it, you're not much of a caregiver.
Right.
At the end of the day. And it can certainly, spill over into your other relationships. You have a husband, you've got boys, kids.
One son,
whether they're
3
grown
girls,
or
yes,
not.
And all live out of state now.
But still they're affected.
You have a lot of other obligations and your own work. And writing was my self-care.
Okay.
The writing's been my self-care for a long, long time. But also walking. So back to the 52 neighborhoods, I mean, walking is part of my therapy. It's what I do. It's kind of how I work out a lot of my writing as well, too. And that was really important. So it's odd that my project of walking the 52 neighborhoods happened in the midst of caring for my mom, too, because it was just, something that I could get out and do that was separate from my mom. Yeah. For myself.
Yes. Why would you encourage other caregivers to read your book? What do you think that they might? I imagine you'd also urge caregivers, even those who say, I can't write. Everyone can journal. Everyone's got something inside that probably would help them to put down on paper, and you have to get out of your own way first, I think. Absolutely. A little bit. It's like, it's not going to be good enough. No, just maybe you've got some advice. Because I think what you've touched on in terms of journaling through this hard stuff for a caregiver, yet alone, I mean, there's 2 parallel stories here about what it does for dementia patients, the writing, which has just got me so fascinated now, and then also taking care of yourself as a caregiver. But what will caregivers get out of the book, do you think?
Of reading the book, there's a lot in there I think they'll find, but I'll just address some of what I think are the big issues, or the big highlights, is finding that which your loved one enjoys, is passionate about, was passionate about, whatever was important to them, and sticking with those types of, we get in there and we think we have to do 20 different things for our loved one. And my title says it all. There were like 5, cookies, music,
and those were the things
get her outside. And that was it. That
was like a loop.
Yeah,
then.
Absolutely. Huh. Absolutely. I didn't need to. There were so many other things I could have done. My mother was a practicing Catholic all her life, and then, of course, the dementia set in. And there's kind of a funny story in there about how she leans over to me in church and says, I'm really not that into Jesus anymore. And I thought, okay, well, I don't have to worry about getting her to church anymore then either. And maybe that was her way of giving me permission to not have to drag her out to church all the time. But, obviously a lot of care communities take care of pastoral needs and everything too. But really just looking for that which your loved one can still enjoy and still connect to, and being focused on that.
Okay.
And truly, in the end, your loved one really just wants your presence. And I mean, the best moments I had with my mom were probably when she just reached for my hand and we could sit in silence. And that's what else I learned in this book, was how to sit with it, how to be with somebody who had dementia, how to sit with somebody who had dementia, not necessarily how to communicate, but how to sit with myself and basically like sit on my hands, because I'm a doer. Yeah. And we're all doers, and we think we have to be doing something, and we don't. We just have to be there for them. And to me, that's one of the biggest lessons in the book was how to be there for my mom and what was important. And I talk a lot about my mom, my parents both were people who just always showed up in our lives, in the lives of their children. And I felt like I had learned how to show up. And I didn't have to show up with any extra baggage. I just had to show up, and I had to leave all the baggage behind.
Yeah.
Because you have to let go of that. You really have to let go of all of your regrets and the lunches you never had with your mom, and the the pedicures, the manicures that you never got to do with your mom because you always said that you were going to do.
Yeah.
And you learn to let go of so many. I think that's the beauty of, if there is a silver lining to dementia being a prolonged, extended disease and challenge for so many people. Yes, money is an absolute factor, but you as a caregiver have an opportunity to grow, and you have an opportunity to just release a lot of those regrets too, and then you don't carry them into whatever the next challenge is in your life.
Wow. If you have a question or would like to share a story, perhaps about your caregiving experience, or ask Annette about perhaps journaling through whatever it is that you might be dealing with right now in your life, please give us a call. Phone lines are open, 513-772-9658. I think one of the things that I picked up from your writing, how to love without memory or regret. Now, you've touched on the regret of leaving that behind.
Yeah.
But how to love without memory, my goodness, that really struck me because, I mean, did your mom recognize you up until the end of her life, or was there a period when she didn't know who you were?
She would go in and out with that. Very
Mm-hmm.
much so, and as is the case with so many others. And, you know, the most difficult aspect of this disease is that there's no one way that it presents.
Yeah.
For it's as unique as the individual that it becomes a part of, and that makes it all the more difficult to to really say, okay, here's what I did, here's what I didn't do, that type of thing, and here's what my mom remembered one day was going to be something she'd forget the next day. But yeah, by memory, I mean, okay, all these things happened to us growing up. You had all these things happen to you growing up, but you've moved past it in a way because of your disease, and I have to move past it too. And or memories about, or things like, if siblings aren't there doing the things that you think they should be doing, when they've got their other concerns in their life, and you think, oh, they're repeating the same patterns that they repeated when we were all growing up. So learning to set those kinds of things aside and recognizing that, you know what, they're there when they can be, and they're there with whatever they can bring to the situation. And, that is another very difficult aspect that I really don't address in this book. I think that's something that's addressed more personally. And I will tell you that I have found that some of my relationships with my siblings have deepened post my parents' death, because when they're still around, even if they have dementia, as children, we're still children, and we do still fulfill certain roles in their lives. So those are really hard to let go of, those initial expectations that you have with kids. What you still want to get out of your parents. You know?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, all kinds of light bulbs are going off in my head right now. Personal ones. I'm not going to share them all. But, and you came from a big family, Italian family.
A big Italian family.
I know. I've read a little bit about your...
and on the cover of the book, we have one of the signature Italian cookies, the pizzelles. And so funny. I had four people I know of during the book festival who recognized the pizzelle and came up to me and said, I know these pizzelles, and my grandmother used to make these pizzelles. And
fun.
So we had conversations about pizzelles. I wish I would have had a big old plate, because I probably would have attracted a few more
probably
customers.
Next signing, you have to bring some pizzelles.
Yes.
Do you make them? Do you use the family recipe then?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a great story about that if we have time.
Oh, sure.
I hosted one of my large book signings at Women Writing for a Change, and I did make the pizzelles for that. And the book signing was on Sunday. So Saturday night, I'm at home, I'm making the pizzelles, my mom's recipe, and I thought, well, my mother was such a perfectionist, so I'm going to just channel my mother and be as perfect as I possibly can with this. And I am perfectly measuring out the flour. I'm making sure that the butter gets cooled to the absolute right temperature, everything you can possibly imagine. Mix it all up, and the pizzelle maker looks a lot like a waffle maker. So you spoon the batter in, and the first couple always turn out burned, so you're like, whatever, it's fine.
So do waffles, by the way.
Yes, right. And you scrape it, you use the fork, you
off.
scrape it away, and you move on. And then it kept happening, the next one. All of a sudden, my entire batch is either burned or they've fallen apart.
No.
Well, now I'm mad, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm mad because I thought, I still have to show up tomorrow with pizzelles. So I am slamming pots. I am throwing flour into the bowl. I am doing everything. I am the, quintessential Italian in this case. And I am swearing. I am so mad. I'm cussing at my mother. And, those turned out about as close to perfect as I could possibly have made them. And my lesson in that was that my mom was who she was in her disease, and I was who I was for her while she was going through her journey. And I could only be that. I could only be sometimes the mad, very frustrated caregiver. And
that's okay.
Wanting everything to be right for my mom, And that's, to me, I just thought, okay, Mom, message sent. Thank you.
Yes, we hear you. I know. And I think it's important. We're going to take a quick break here. And I have a surprise for listeners, so hold on. That when you get that feeling that your parent, your loved one, is present in some way, acknowledge that, because I just think, I'm getting a little philosophical here, but my sister was just in town, and we were together for the first time in a long time on the anniversary of our father's death 31 years ago. And she and I, on her wedding, she died just weeks after my dad died, and he was trying to make it to that wedding. He had his tux out, the whole bit. And he didn't make it to that. So we're at the front of the church. I'm her maid of honor. And we kneel for Mass. And she and I are next to each other. Her husband is on the other side of her. Our heads whipped around to look at each other at the exact same moment.
Wow.
And we both just smiled and nodded. We knew Dad was right there.
Yeah.
And I've told other people who've lost a parent, accept those moments where you think, that's nothing.
Yeah.
But George is nodding here too. But there's that connection that's so powerful that it can give you some joy.
It really does. Yeah. It can bring a lot of joy. And we talked about, you and I, how the fact that I didn't have an opportunity to really grieve and miss my dad until after my mom passed away, which she passed away about a year and a half ago. And but at some point, this goes back probably 6 months or so, when I was finishing putting the book together, I had a dream about my dad. And my dad was a gardener, so we were outside, and I was growing pansies, but they were growing outside the shade of this big tree. And to me, it was a letting go, in a way, of all my family obligations, of taking care of the family tree. But I knew that it came from my dad, because I mean, my mom was not the outdoors person. It was my dad.
It was Dad.
And it was a really special, touching moment. And I lost my first husband to leukemia almost 20 years ago. And, you know, the times when I feel his presence are too numerous to count. And it's still 20 years later, you do still feel that presence. And it's just your spirit's just open to receiving it, and, you know, in that particular moment.
And I guess your message and mine too would be the open word, which is to be to be open to that, and just invite that moment in, and you know, hold on to it as long as you can.
Yes, and then you know you have to move through those moments. But absolutely, yeah.
Well, I'm talking to Annette Januzzi Wick, and we're talking about her book, I'll Have Some of Yours. And actually, she brought in a copy of her book that we can give away during the program today. We're going to take a short break, and if you'd like a copy, we'll go with that first caller. How about that?
Perfect.
We'll make it easy. And the number to call would be 513-772-9658, and we'll be live until 2 o'clock. You can call and ask a question, too, or share your story. We'll be right back.
Support comes from Coors Core Fitness, a medical fitness studio providing personal training by certified trainers for those challenged with medical issues from chronic illness, post-rehabilitation, weight loss, and general fitness. They provide Parkinson's exercise classes in numerous facilities throughout Greater Cincinnati. These classes focus on Parkinson's symptom-specific exercises. More information from Coors Core Fitness at 513-233-2673 or at CoorsCoreFitness.com.
The views and discussion expressed on this program do not necessarily represent those of the hosts of the program or of WMKV Radio, Maple Knoll Communities, WLHS Radio, the Lakota Local School District, or its staff or management. Discussion of specific points and general topics on this program are not meant to be taken as specific professional advice.
Good afternoon. I'm Robyn Allgeyer, your host for HealthScope today, and we are live, and we have a copy of Annette Januzzi Wick's new book called I'll Have Some of Yours, What My Mother Taught Me About Dementia, Cookies, Music, the Outside, and Her Life Inside a Care Home. It's a beautiful book, a collection of essays about her taking care of her mom who had dementia for 6 years.
My mom had dementia for 10 years, and then I was her caregiver for
6 of those, the last 6 of her life. So this beautiful book is yours. If you'd like to call, be the first caller at 513-772-9658, or you can call in, share a story, or ask a question. And there are some other opportunities to meet Annette this week even. We'll talk about those in a little bit. She'll be doing some more book signings around town. Now, before we started today, I asked you a little bit about what you would suggest a caregiver make sure they do if they are going through what you have experienced. And we hear a lot about taking care of yourself, and I thought that's what you were going to say. Be sure you take care of yourself as the caregiver. But you had something else to say, and I did put her on the spot a little bit this afternoon, ask you if there's any passage you could read, we'd love to hear you read.
And lo and behold, I know my work well enough to come up with one. Yeah. Yes, we did talk a little bit about self-care, but there's other strategies that you can employ that are really just, I'm going to just address this very, very simple one, and some of this has to do with growing up in a large Italian family. And, you know, the fact that family was important to my parents, they instilled that notion in us. You know, I think it's really a value that caregivers recognize when your loved one is living in some sort of community setting. That's their home. Their home is no longer like my mom's home was in Amherst, Ohio. It's not with you or wherever their previous address. Like, this is their home, physically, mentally, emotionally. And there are people outside of you as the family member who live meaning, you know, spend their time within this community as well too. And how can I, as a family member, make my mother's transition just a little bit easier So I'm going to read this little passage here.
Okay, good.
It was Ash Wednesday. I entered my mother's care home with an abundance of guilt for not having attended to any holy day of obligation in years. 3-ish, I was told by the receptionist when asking about the time of the church services. I guessed there was no need to adhere to a schedule when time was all the residents had. Wandering into the activities room, I spied 15 residents, including my mother, watching a short film about the old Burma Shave ads. Dinah doesn't treat him right, but if he'd shave, Dinah might. Burma Shave. I recognized those ads, having used a similar marketing approach when I'd started a drive-through coffee bar in my 20s. I was still shivering as I took off my blue lightweight pea coat, an outerwear mistake since the weather had yet to turn, and I recited along with the others. So many factors determine the ease with which my mother or any loved one made the transition into long-term care a successful one. Mental and physical health. Were the surroundings made comfortable with familiar items? In my mother's case, her Virgin Mary nightlight. How often were residents able to slip outside into the sunshine of their own volition? Was the center staff attentive to needs of an individual, and did they like to throw parties? My mother loved to throw parties and attend them. But only one factor was within my control, the effort I put into making her feel as if she were part of a larger family that I had joined too.
Wonderful.
So the piece goes on to talk about being part of Ash Wednesday services and listening to the residents speak of their gratitude. And it ends with my mom kind of, going off back into her mind, if you will. And I shared some potato chips with another resident, and I pulled up a chair and we sat down and we played a game together. So there were times when my mom was not necessarily present, but I felt it was important. I'm here. I've already made the effort to be here, and I've already done whatever I could for my mom in that particular moment. So why not give a little bit more of my time to be there for somebody else? And I watched other family members do that too. And I knew that they gave to my mom if I couldn't be there. And the same with all the caregivers, the staff, the nurses. It's really important for me that families recognize that everyone is really doing their best. And the more you walk in and start demanding things be different, the more difficult your situation is going to be.
Wonderful. We have a caller.
Nice.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So put on your headphones.
Okay.
So we can hear Frank from Westchester, who has just called. Frank, thanks so much for calling.
Oh, thank you so much. It was interesting. When I heard, I'm a little out of breath. I had to drop something off at a nursing home here. But I can really identify with some of the things because for the last 6 years, I'm sort of semi-retired. Me and my wife go to many different nursing homes, about 200 a year. And we play music for an hour for the activity hours. Not often, but maybe a quarter of what we do, we tend to have in our particular activity someone who has dementia, maybe even higher than that. And just some good stories in music, and I appreciated when she said that music is part of it. For instance, we had an example down here at a nursing home we went to, the memory loss unit. And I did, by the way, work with a little bit, and he can, if you ever want to talk to him, I'm sure you know him, at one of your centers, the 8 Lois Center, Marvin Knobloch. And Marvin knows me.
I know Marvin.
Yeah, Marvin knows. I've been out there playing for his place, but this was at another facility. And that night, we usually get, 15 to 30 people, depending on what. But in this unit, there was only 2. There was an ex-sailor, and then there was, an ex-serviceman. And then there was a lady who we were told by the nurse that she only spoke in German, that when her memory loss hit her, that she lost the ability to speak in English. So anyway, I always do a song that they seem to like. It's sort of French, but it's real. Everybody knows it. It's Doris Day's Que Sera, Sera. And so we started singing it, and believe it or not, this lady who was only supposed, she never speaks English. She'd been there like 6 months, and then she started singing the song in English.
Oh, that's wonderful! Wow.
Yeah. And then there was another fella at the facility I'm at right now. I don't want to give the name of it, but we were in the sort of Alzheimer wing wherever they service. It's a big facility. But there was a fellow who was admitted and hadn't spoken a word in English to anybody hardly. The activity director told me afterward, until we played King of the Road. And we started, he sang the song better than I did. And it was just so amazing to...
I guess we know who's going to be in charge in that care community.
I know, because she came out, the activity director came up to me and said, I don't believe it. I said, what? He says, he's been here 6 months and has not spoken to anybody, but he knew the words of those songs. He sang them out loud, too.
Frank, have you ever watched the documentary Alive Inside?
No.
Oh, look it up sometime. I'm sure you can rent it on Netflix and whatnot, but it's a really, I think you would find it, it would resonate with everything we're talking about today, but it is all about, bringing some piece of the residents out through music. I think you would just love that. And there's actually an Alive Inside Foundation, and they're still active and busy after all these years, and that's what they do. And there's groups called Rock Out Against Dementia and everything, So,
wow,
yeah. Well, thank you for all your work, Frank. That's important.
Thank you for
Keep
your
at
good
it.
Work.
Frank?
And, maybe one of these days we'll run into each other. You never know.
I hope so.
That's a good point.
I hope so. Yes.
Frank?
Listen, thanks, ladies. I appreciate the discussion.
I want to let you know, though, Frank, that I can't think of a better person to get the copy of this book than you. And you may have been inside, not in your car, but Annette brought a copy of her book. I'll have some of yours.
Oh, yes, that would be great.
And you're perfect to have this book.
You are absolutely perfect, Frank. And my website is listed in there, and there's a way to contact me through my website. So please do connect with me after you have a chance to read it.
Yes.
Read it.
I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank.
So, Frank, if you can hold on the line, we'll take your address and get this
I think
book
he got it already.
Oh, he did. All right, good.
I think he got
we
it.
took care of business already. All right, thanks so much. Thanks for your call.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, Live Inside is a gem, and there's a Cincinnati connection to that film as well. The gentleman who did the film,
yes,
his mother lives here, Franchon Shore, and she's well known as a dancer in town. That's her son.
I didn't know that was her son.
That's her son. And it did win Best Documentary at Sundance the year it came out.
It absolutely. I was an early funder for the movie, and so I followed it all that way. I'm not listed in any of the credits or whatnot, but but one of the testimonials in my book is from the gentleman who still does outreach for the Alive Inside Foundation.
Wonderful. So
yeah.
That Alive Inside, if you'd like to look that up. Yeah,
yes.
All about music and dementia, the miraculous things like Frank just described.
Yeah.
Now, back to your book, Annette. Also, we have a note here, George, that perhaps we have another question. Mike dropped in.
That's the winner.
Okay, that's the winner. Got that.
Okay.
Your title, I'll Have Some of Yours. Now, I'm thinking cookies, Pitzels, but what is that based on, title?
The prologue explains the title, so a little teaser there.
All right.
But
would you rather not reveal?
I'll give some hints.
Okay.
I think most of us who have gone out in some sort of couples fashion where there might be a male and female, if you will, and the male always orders the plate of prime rib with mashed potatoes and beans and dessert,
extra
et cetera,
bread.
et cetera. Yeah. And the female orders the Caesar salad, and the male says, oh, well, that's not a lot. And I said, well, that's okay, because I'll just have some of yours. So it's a little bit related to that, human nature that's inside all of us,
Yes.
to always be thinking about what's on somebody else's plate.
What's on somebody else's plate? Boy, now I've got a whole lot of different things I'm thinking about. I actually was at a restaurant that had a menu item. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember because it's so funny. But basically, it was based on that. It was called Your Girlfriend's.
Oh, that's funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was, the girlfriend who gets the salad but still wants to eat. Here's a few other things
Right.
that maybe you could order her so she won't eat off your plate.
Well, speaking of restaurants, Cincinnati, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Cincinnati has an initiative called the Dementia Inclusive Cincinnati, and it's a movement by certain care communities, the city of Cincinnati, some hospitals, and they are actually out training workers in various restaurants. They're training libraries. So there's the Memory Cafe in our public library system. You can look this up, where you can bring in your caregiver or the loved one, bring them in. The librarians all trained. There's activities. They can wander. They can roam. They can look at books. So we're starting to talk about what are the safe places to bring our loved ones so that they do not feel isolated in our communities. Back to Starfire. It's same as the individuals we were talking about with Starfire.
Yes, to not be isolated.
Do not be isolated, yeah.
And certainly, my goodness, we've seen that with autism over the last number of years. With the pumpkins, even for Halloween this week. If you see a home with I think the teal pumpkins are for food allergies, but there's also a pumpkin color to let you know that that house is going to be friendly. It's not going to have crazy noises and things.
Yes.
And so some of those accommodations is just so encouraging.
We are so much smarter as a society. Yeah. We really are. We're really dedicating those resources, and I think because we have a large number of people who are going to be moving into more dementia states.
Yeah. Well, because
not dementia states.
But 50 and 50 plus is one of the factors.
Absolutely. And people are living longer. So this is going to continue to be part of our daily conversation, no matter what. So whether we're at a restaurant, whether we're at the library, I think they were talking to banks and training bank tellers and how to recognize, people that are struggling. And, you hear that story all the time about, well, mom drained the bank account and we don't even know where all that money went. Yeah. So recognizing that bankers and, we can reach out into the community and ask for help. And that's what caregivers need to remember, too, is how to reach out into the community and ask for help.
That asking for help topic comes up on this program all the time.
Yeah.
And how hard it is, and that's based on my own experience. It's hard to ask for help. There's something about admitting that you need it, that you have to get over that hurdle because people want to help.
Yes. Well, if I might bring up my my accident 3 weeks ago. Yes. We've talked about my walking. I was out for my morning walk, and I was a pedestrian in a crosswalk when I was hit by a car. And so I have had all these moments of just enlightenment about being the person who's being cared for. Also having a lot more respect for my caregivers, but recognizing what does it take to ask for help, why it's so hard, because we all want to be independent. We all want to be independent human beings. That's what we're raised to be, unless we're, 5 years old. And, really how to be vulnerable is what I'm learning. And it's really frightening. And we don't teach that in our society. We don't allow people to be vulnerable. And I think that's what makes it harder later on to ask for help.
Because we're taught that that's
weak.
Yeah. Not cool.
Not cool. Exactly.
And then you start navigating this other little sort of fine line where you've got an older parent who's starting to need some assistance, and you want to help, but they don't want it because they're not in a place yet where they're ready to accept it because it'll show a sign of weakness. So you want to help and you think you're doing the right thing. So It is a journey. And let's get back to this. Writing about that, whether you consider yourself a writer or not, if you can encourage anyone in this last 10 to less minutes that we have to pick up a pen and how your journaling really helped you and your journey taking care of your mom.
Right. As I've mentioned before, writing's always been such a part of my life for such a very long time. And I learned at 20 years ago that was going to be how I would process a lot of my emotions.
When your husband passed.
When my husband passed away.
And you have a book. Please mention the title of that book.
That one's called I'll Be in the Car. One woman's story of love, loss, and reclaiming life. So I stuck with the owl, the contraction for I will. And I don't know what the next one is, but I have a girlfriend. We always joke about the next one that'll be she and I, and we'll write about I'll be at the bar. But I did learn.
I won't be in the crosswalk.
I will not be in the crosswalk, yes. Exactly. Or I'll be in the crosswalk and don't hit me next time is what I need to write.
Right.
But writing is so important. There is a just part of it's really almost like a magical process. You don't recognize that it's going to happen. You think, I'm not going to write. And then all of a sudden, things just come through your pen. I've seen it in my writing workshops. I have a colleague of mine and we offer writing workshops through the Alzheimer's Association. And those are free workshops.
Please tell us all about those because we have about 5 minutes. I do not want to miss that opportunity.
Absolutely. They're sponsored by the Alzheimer's Association. We do, we host them about once a quarter. That's what approximately. We just hosted one in September. I think our next one will be in February. And they're 3 hours long on a Saturday. They're free. We host them at the Alzheimer's Association headquarters downtown on Lynn Street. And we use, poetry and prose. Actually, my colleague and I bring pieces that we've written for people to use and see how have we processed this particular topic. And you can feel the tension when people come in and they have their walls up. I am not going to write. I'm not going to cry. I'm here, but I'm not sure how this is going to go. And by the end, they're all very grateful that they had the opportunity to just find another way to express what is happening to them. So you can go to support groups, you can talk, but there is a different part of you that comes out. We are not the same person in person that we are when we write. There's a different person who comes out on the page, and that's, things that have been suppressed inside of us, things we don't even know that surprise ourselves. How many times have you written something and I didn't even know that was inside of me, and here it just comes out. Mm-hmm. So I encourage everybody to take up a pen and a journal, and there's a lot of ways that you can find writing prompts on the internet or just at the bookstore for like little inspirational books and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to come out as a book. It just has to come out.
Don't check your grammar when you start.
Right.
Just write.
It just has to come out.
Yeah.
It just has to come out.
Now, let's talk, too. We just have a couple of minutes of where you are going to be with your book doing some signings and some talks, too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I've been out working in various care communities throughout the city of Cincinnati, and then I'm also doing a little bit of traveling as well, too. And some of the talks are marketing related. Some of them are related to a very specific aspect about caregiving, such as how to have the talk, those types of things. And then I also have book signings where I'll be sharing information and doing some reading. So I have one upcoming on Sunday that will be from noon to 4 at Smith & Hannon, and that one's down in Over the Rhine in downtown Cincinnati. And there's a few I'll have, if you check my website, I'll have a few more. But this accident that I was a part of has set me back a little bit in terms of my schedule. So I've had to rearrange some things. So I think still on my website, I had a second one listed that was this week that I had to cancel.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that was tomorrow night.
Yes, absolutely,
right. Yeah. Annette, I imagine there are some listeners like me sitting here going, you were a young woman and lost your husband to leukemia, and you kept writing. And your journey of living out west in Oregon, which I think may have been because of your first husband.
Right.
That was home, and then you come back and you go through this whole process of losing both your parents, caregiving your mom with dementia, and then you get hit by a car when your book's published.
I know, when my book was being published.
I know, and I'm sure people think, how is this woman getting through everything? But here you are, just a beautiful person inside and out, and a great community connector. I just thank you so much. I thank you for all the gifts you're sharing, and I'm just incredibly proud to know you.
Thank you. Well, what a blessing it's been to be here today. And I couldn't do any of it without the people that I've surrounded myself with over the years who continue to boost me. And I had a lot of handlers just for me to get to that Books by the Banks festival on Saturday, and they all came through for me. And I feel like I live off of the love of others.
Yeah, and you're accepting help when
yes,
you need
exactly.
it. That's a huge takeaway.
Huge.
So, Annette Januzzi Wick, thanks so much for being here. I'll have some of yours, what my mother taught me about dementia, cookies, music, the outside, and her life inside a care home. Get the book, and you can find it. Your website address.
Absolutely. Annette, ANNETTEJWICK.com. Annette J. Wick. The book is also available through Amazon and other online retailers.
Good. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Robyn.
And don't forget, you can catch this interview again. Tell your friends if you think I know someone who needs to hear this. And I'm sure there are plenty of you saying that. Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. And if that's too early for you, it will be available tomorrow as a podcast on our website, WMKVFM.org. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Health Scope on WMKV and WLHS, and streaming around the world at WMKVFM.org. Join us each week at this time for a discussion of the latest in medical technology issues and topics on 89.3 WMKV, 89.9 WLHS, and online at WMKVFM.org.